Welcome, everyone. We're diving into a fascinating look at the Pharisees, a group that's been misunderstood for nearly 2,000 years.
Absolutely. It's crazy how a term that began as a mark of respect ended up as an insult over time, right?
Yeah, so the thing is, for centuries, people have been calling Pharisees hypocrites and self-righteous elites, but really, they were a powerhouse within ancient religious life. They
Mm-hmm.
essentially molded what today we recognize as Judaism and even impacted early Christianity.
Right? And it's like, if you think about it, those ancient Pharisees actually shaped the whole conversation about law and tradition.
Exactly. Think about this. They emerged during the Hasmonean dynasty, coming up as one of three big factions with the Sadducees and the Essenes.
Yep.
But what made them unique was that they steered their authority among the people rather than in the temple, which was the focus for the Sadducees.
So in a way, they democratized the religious practice, right? They weren't just locked into elite circles.
Right on. They promoted a living law, a sort of oral tradition that interpreted the Torah in a way that people could apply to
Yeah,
daily
exactly.
life. Makes you think about how fluid religious thought can be.
Uh, isn't it interesting how that kind of flexibility is what modern Judaism thrives on?
Totally. Their approach wasn't static, it evolved, and it also gave rise to ideas that echoed in early Christian thought, like the resurrection, angels, and divine judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like they planted these seeds early on.
Speaking of which, there's that surprising possibility that both Jesus and Paul might have been influenced by or even been Pharisees.
Yeah, that's one of the wild parts. Imagine Jesus, debating as an equal with the Pharisees, using their own arguments. In Matthew's account, he even tells his followers, "Do what the Pharisees teach, but not what they do." It's like, he's separating the
Right,
teachings from the
exactly.
behavior.
But then, how do we reconcile that with the New Testament portrayal of them as outright adversaries?
Well, that's a good question. When you look deeper, it seems those later portrayals might be more a product of later tensions, maybe even propaganda, to create a stark divide between the message of Jesus and the established traditions.
Mm-hmm.
It could, be more about criticizing hypocrisy than rejecting everything Pharisaic.
I see what you mean. But don't you think some of the textual evidence still shows a pretty clear conflict? Like, wasn't there an element of rivalry there?
Possibly, but it might have been more nuanced, almost like internal debate within a shared tradition, rather than one group turning fully against the other.
Yeah, definitely.
And then there's Paul, who proudly calls himself a Pharisee of Pharisees.
Right, that really shifts how we see early Christianity. Instead of a schism from the Pharisaic tradition, it might have been more like an evolution of it.
Exactly. It's like Christianity was not born out of rebellion, but out of a very complex, almost familial debate within the Pharisaic tradition. It's kind of like evolving from a family recipe that was tweaked over
Mm-hmm.
time.
And then there was that major turning point in 70 CE, right? When the Romans destroyed the temple, the Sadducees and Essenes were wiped out, but the Pharisees survived by reinventing themselves.
Yes, that's a critical moment. With the temple gone, they shifted the focus to the synagogue and to the study and interpretation of the law. It laid the groundwork for what we today recognize as Rabbinic Judaism,
Right, right.
a transformation born out of necessity and resilience.
It's almost poetic how, despite such a cataclysm, the Pharisaic ethos managed to not only survive but thrive.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. Though Christians have historically used Pharisee as a slur, they were essentially referring to the ancestors of modern Judaism, people who made Judaism what it is today. It's an irony
Mm-hmm.
that should really be thought about.
Right. Because every time that term is hurled, it's ignoring the profound legacy of adaptation and survival.
Yes, indeed. And this legacy is evident in every synagogue, every Talmudic debate, every single rabbinic interpretation that exists today. It's the living spirit of the Pharisees that enabled Judaism to survive exile, persecution, and even the collapse of its central institution, the Temple.
Yep. That really brings home the point that the true power of the Pharisees was in their ability to adapt.
Right. It's like they had this miraculous knack for reinterpreting faith under pressure. And honestly, that's a lesson for any tradition. Survival isn't about clinging to the past. It's about evolving with the times.
Yeah, for sure. But here's a thought. Do you think that sometimes in modern discourse, we oversimplify these historical nuances when we use loaded terms like Pharisee?
Absolutely, and that's a crucial critique.
Mm-hmm.
When someone casually calls another person a Pharisee, it's like throwing away centuries of complex history for a quick insult. It misses the dynamic evolution and the deep intellectual contributions they made.
I mean, if we truly understood their impact, we'd realize that without the Pharisees, neither Rabbinic Judaism nor early Christianity would exist as we know them.
Exactly. Their method of integrating an oral tradition with Scripture and their philosophical stances on resurrection and divine judgment even influenced key Christian doctrines. It's almost as if they laid the blueprint for both faiths.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of ironic, too. You mentioned earlier that Jesus might have been debating within a Pharisaic framework. So, in a sense, he was engaging with ideas that, at least in part, he shared.
Totally. And it really makes you reconsider the narrative of a sharp divide between Jesus and the Pharisees. Rather, it appears more like a continuum where dialogue and debate were the norm.
Yeah, exactly. But I have to ask, why did later Christian traditions feel compelled to reinvent this narrative as if the Pharisees were the enemy?
Oh, that's a complex issue. It seems that as Christianity sought to establish its own legitimacy, there was a deliberate effort to demarcate a stark us versus them line. It's like they needed a villain to highlight their own revolutionary message, even if that villain was misrepresented.
That makes sense, but it also shows how historical reinterpretation can fuel modern prejudices and anti-Jewish sentiment, right?
Yeah, exactly. When those labels were used without context, they contributed to a long legacy of division. It's a cautionary tale about how simplifying history can have real-world consequences, even centuries later.
Right, totally. It's interesting. By digging into this history, we can see that the so-called enemies might have been far more intertwined than we typically assume.
Yes, indeed. The whole story, when you peel back the layers, is about adaptation, survival, and even mutual influence. For instance, without the Pharisees, modern Judaism likely wouldn't exist, and early Christian thought would have looked dramatically different.
Yeah, exactly. And it just makes you wonder, how many other historical narratives have been oversimplified by later reinterpretations?
That's an excellent question. It's a reminder to always approach history with a critical mind. To look at the underlying complexities rather than just the labels.
For sure. It's like history is this living dialogue itself, constantly being rewritten and reinterpreted by each generation.
Absolutely. And, the legacy of the Pharisees is a prime example of that. Their spirit lives on every time a rabbi interprets Scripture or when modern Jewish practice centers on study and prayer rather than sacrifice.
Indeed. It's really a testament to how resilient ideas can be when they're rooted in the real lives of people.
Exactly. So next time you hear the term Pharisee being used derogatorily, remember that it's a label that masks an incredible history, a history of survival, adaptability, and profound influence on two major world religions.
Absolutely. Wow. That really paints a much richer picture of not just the past, but how those ideas still resonate today.
Yep, that's the takeaway. History is rarely black and white. The complexities of the Pharisees remind us that often what's dismissed as hypocrisy might instead be a deep, intricate evolution of faith and tradition.
Agreed. Fascinating stuff. Thank you for untangling this with me.
Thanks for the great conversation. Till next time, keep questioning and diving deep into history.